Sean, how are you?
I'm good.
Cool. Very nice to see you again. So, what are we talking about today?
So today I thought it'd be helpful to talk about something that was inspired by a book that I read recently called Lost Connections by Johann Hari,
Hmm.
where I think through the book I've realized we've lost touch with ourselves and the people around us, and it's not entirely our fault. The narrative has been hijacked by companies and corporations who create these ridiculous standards, all in the name of profit. And I just thought it'd be useful to discuss this because I think the standards that we all seem to have grown to accept to me are have been unconscious or consciously implemented by ads and marketing and social media. And I think just in the name of what it is that we're doing, just being aware,
Yeah.
and being conscious of that, I just thought would be a helpful topic to discuss.
Yeah, man.
Um, but how's that sound to you?
No, that sounds super interesting. Because I've been thinking about this, and I'm sure a lot of people have been thinking of. Um, it's super relevant because every day you're getting assailed with messages about how to be, what to be, and why to be, right? And it comes to a point sometimes you have to just feel like guilty if you are not hustling, guilty if you're not gymming every day, guilty if you don't look or you don't look a certain way or you don't earn a certain amount of money. And what's concerning for me, and maybe this is related to what you're talking about, is if not this, then what? If not what I'm being sold, because I've been assailed by so many messages from corporates about how I should live my life, and that I don't even know what the alternative is, right? Assuming that
Yeah.
everything that had been sold to me is basically a marketing pitch, right? Designed to get me to part with my dollars or my attention or my state of mind. Um, if that's all not true, then what is the alternative? How do I even begin to find the alternative? So that's why I think it's super interesting.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's the thing, I think
It's
um I think I mentioned to you, for example, like the concept of having 3 meals a day, right? Is actually really only like about 100 years old
yeah,
in terms of that need to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Um, and then 50 years ago, then snacking as a concept started being implemented into the general population, and again, where does all that stuff come from, right?
yeah,
And I think the reality is that when your attention and that time to think and reflect constantly keeps getting hijacked, you're not really giving yourself the chance to think about any of these things. You're ultimately allowing forces around you to dictate the standards by which you live. Um, and so, I think just in terms of that, like, I mentioned an example of the concept of 3 meals a day.
mm,
I mean, there's plenty of examples of that, right? Like even the concept of working hours being specifically 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Again, only happened within the last 100 years, maybe a little over than that. Um, but I mean, ultimately, like the workforce had to retaliate because actually the work week once upon a time was Monday to Sunday, you know,
shit.
and at some point, someone decided to go, you know what, this isn't working for us. People are not happy. And what happened? The workforce retaliated just to negotiate the concept of the weekend, you know?
Wow.
Um, so I don't know, it's just, I think the reality is that there's certainly plenty of good that's coming from consuming different perspectives, but I think companies, right now and corporations are obviously understanding the value of dictating this narrative. And I think it's time we sort of be a little bit more conscious of that, especially when this creeping thought of, am I enough? Have I done enough? Am I doing enough? Where does that all come from? You know, and taking a step back from the question in itself and asking yourself why,
Hmm.
and it's actually also in the same vein of what we were discussing yesterday, right? Like when you address something that you're passionate about or nervous or stressed out about, why why is it that your attention has just suddenly decided to concentrate on that, or consistently concentrates on that, when the mind is quiet? Why does it just quickly flick to that? Why?
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
And I guarantee you, if you keep peeling back those layers, you're going to eventually find the root cause of it.
Yeah.
And I think the terrifying thing is, a lot of those times you'll realize that it's actually got nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
These thoughts actually have come from some external narrative that's telling you, hey, this is what you got to do to be happy, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Like, I'm not sure if you have any examples of that, whether you can sort of resonate to some of the things that I've mentioned.
No, it definitely resonates, man. Thank you for sharing, firstly. Very, very interesting points you've made. Um, when I think about these things, when I hear about these things, my first reaction is that it pisses me off. Um, because if you think about it logically, this has to be unethical. Why is it okay
Mm,
to manipulate people, to manipulate their minds and their lives in this way? At what point does it stop being just a corporation offering its goods and services, right, in exchange for someone's dollars? At
yeah,
what point do we cross over to pure manipulation and control, where we're literally doing everything we can to disrupt a person's, to hijack a person, right? To not even condition a person, but to hijack a person in order to get them to buy more or to try our products and services. And this bugs me because when we, all of us are actually guilty of it, especially if you're in the field where you're designing or creating ventures and products, right? If you think about some of the concepts that they use in, for example, designing software, right? Most of UX design, right, which is user experience, right, or user interface design, there's a lot of brain power that goes into understanding and testing and experimenting to see which colored button will compel people to, hit the subscribe button, right? Which font, which color palette, right? Which layout, will be, most appealing to people, right? And that's just on the surface level. But if you think about what people involved in that exercise are actually doing, they're trying to find ways to manipulate you, to hijack you in a
yeah,
sense, right? Is
hmm
that ethical? And is that right? And that's the question. Like, I feel like sometimes we are so engrossed, we're so far down the rabbit hole that we don't even think about these things, you know. Um, and that's why I get pissed off when I think about these things, because that's something that I had to do when I was trying to, build a software solution, right? Where we were sitting down and I realized that the conversations we were having internally about product and about design is like, how do you compel people to buy your product? How do you compel them to realize that this is a need? How do you compel them to believe that if they don't buy your product, something bad is going to happen, right? So is that fear, uncertainty, and I forget what D means, but it's basically, how do you manipulate a person into doing what you want, right? So when I
yeah,
hear these things, and then a lot of it can't help but piss you off, because you think about the work week that you're talking about. Imagine how hard that fight must have been just to claim back 2 days for yourself. Imagine that, right?
that's the thing. I think the feeling of being pissed off and angry is a perfectly normal response. Because I think the from the sounds of it, it's part of the stages of grief.
Yeah.
And I think it's all of a sudden realizing, hang on, like I've been somewhat manipulated this
Yeah,
entire time, and my thoughts aren't necessarily entirely my own.
yeah,
But, I think the thing to bear in mind is that it's not your fault. You're fighting against forces that are, it's like trying to fight against the ocean in a
yeah,
manner of speaking. You're fighting against companies that have hundreds of millions, sometimes billions of dollars in at their arsenal,
yeah,
where they're hiring behavioral therapists and analysts that understand what to do to keep you hooked for just a little bit longer. And so, I think the first stage after feeling a bit pissed off and angry is understanding that it's not your fault.
yeah,
Um, but then I think once you are almost aware of the situation, what do you do with it, right? I mean, to me, again, from this book that I was reading, the way to kind of look at it is treat it like pollution.
yeah,
Treat ads, marketing, um, social media to a certain degree like pollution, right, for the
yeah,
mind. um, where what did we do when we found out that there were certain chemicals in the burning of styrofoam boxes that was creating this enormous gaping hole in the ozone layer, right? We limited our use as a as an entire human population down to 99%,
yeah,
right? And slowly the ozone layer ended up repairing itself until fast forward to today, and that is no longer one of the things that we have to worry about. Um, Ignoring the fact that there's still plenty of other things that we still need to worry about because we have figured out other ways to poison this world around us. But yeah, I think treating ads and marketing um, as pollution, right?
mm,
And so as such, not exposing yourself to as much of that, you know,
yeah,
I think is the solution. I mean, it's to me the reason why people are now more than ever gravitating towards meditation, towards yoga,
yeah,
towards exercise, because it innately taps into something that's natural and primal in all of us, that when you take a moment to take a breath, when you stretch, when you're out in nature, um, when you're connecting with someone, not just online or via Zoom, but face to face,
yeah,
and just talking to someone and entrusting the thoughts that go through your head with another person. That in itself um, taps back into something that I think many people have forgotten how to appreciate. Um, so that to me is some of the solutions that we're employing.
yeah,
My problem is that companies are starting to catch on to that, and they're now implementing that into um, the work environment to again just to keep us hooked a little bit longer.
yeah,
So yeah, I think it's just time that we be a bit more aware of that,
yeah,
and see where that leads us.
yeah. That's
Yeah,
true, man.
but
I
I
mean,
don't know. What do you think?
no, I mean, agree with everything that you're saying. Yes, I think it's a bit ironic that companies are they're doing all these things, right, to keep you there in the interest of well-being and mental health, when the point is really to keep you, functioning long enough to keep working for the companies, right? So it's a bit ironic, I think. Another thing that bugs me is these apps that claim to promote mental health and well-being, right? It it makes it seem as if on our own we're incapable of meditating, right? It creates this reliance and this dependence on technology, right? Why can't you just sit down by yourself in a quiet space somewhere and just listen to your own breath? Why do you need to pay 25 bucks or so for an app to listen to someone else somewhere else tell you, how to do it, right? It's a bit stupid actually, right? That, and it goes to what you're saying earlier. Like, we don't even take a moment to sit down and question things and ask ourselves why. Why do I need this app, right? Why do I need to live this way? Why do I need to have 3 meals a day, right? What is my body telling me? Like, we're being force fed information. We're being sort of told exactly what to think, how to live, how to be. And as a consequence of that, we've lost the ability to listen to ourselves, right? To diagnose
Yeah,
ourselves and gain that trust with ourselves, regain that or build a relationship with ourselves, right? And that sometimes means just being quiet and not doing anything, not being productive, just being quiet and just relaxing, being lazy and daydreaming, right? There is nothing wrong with that. How have we come to be, how have we come to this point where to just relax and be sane and normal and healthy is just not good enough, right? It's crazy, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, and it's sad, and again, these are all once again sadness, and the sadness that I feel like it's all part of the stages of grief,
Yeah,
so be angry, be sad, but above all be aware of it, and
yeah,
then try to do something about it, and understand that it's not going to be a flip of a switch. You're not going to necessarily be able to just unplug from the rest of the world, because that also isn't the solution. I mean, there are probably people that have tried doing that, but
yeah,
it's difficult, because you're also, in order to unplug from that, you're potentially also going to need to unplug from everyone around you, and that also removes you from something that is innately and deeply required, and that can be a completely separate topic altogether at some
yeah,
stage in the future. But it's
yeah,
the need for companionship and the need for a tribe. You can't do that, so at the very least, trying to limit the pollution of the
yeah,
mind, um, I think is homework that everyone can try
yeah.
to get on board with.
I love what you said, man, and I think you're right. It's how do you create that tribe and community, right? And that's, I think, what we're trying to do. And it starts with one person, right? So you are my community for this, right? And and that's how a safe space, gets built, right? And having someone to talk to
Hmm.
about these things, knowing that we can at least explore this, um, and try and find solutions for ourselves, and then practice it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And this is a message that I want to
In the
share with everybody else.
absence,
Yeah, but
exactly, yeah,
this,
and hopefully in the absence of our ego.
yeah, yeah, hopefully,
But yeah,
hopefully.
sorry. Yeah.
But I want, I mean, this, the point is, I want to share this message with everybody else, right? Like, look, if this, like, if this message resonates with you, tell us what you think, right? Like, how does it feel, like, when you listen to what Sean said earlier in this episode about being subjected to such influences that are outside of us, where it almost feels like you're being manipulated. Like, have you ever thought about that, right? And if so, like, what are you doing about it? How does it make you feel, right? Love to hear what people think. And I really invite people to be part of the conversation as well, right? What about you, man?
Yeah,
Any final thoughts?
100%. No, that's it really. Like, I'm really glad that we got a chance to talk about this. It's something that I still contend with,
Yeah,
sometimes on a daily basis.
yeah,
There's certain days where it's easy, other days where it's hard, and the easy is actually plugging straight back into this
yeah,
and just succumbing to the pollution. But then the hard part really is, being conscious, being aware, and making the decision to step away from it all,
yeah,
and choosing to be with yourself.
yeah.
It's
Well said.
difficult.
Well said. Yeah. Could you share the name of the book again before we go?
Lost Connections by Johan Hari.
Perfect. I'll
Fantastic book.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Check it out, folks. We'll probably do a quick book review at some point this week as well. What do you think?
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah,
Awesome.
man, for sure.
Cool, man. Speak to you soon.
Love you, bro.